Claire Dawson had not planned to stay awake that night. She went to bed at 10, like she always did when Richard was out of town. The house in their quiet Portland suburb felt too big when he traveled. The ticking clock in the hallway sounded louder. The refrigerator hummed like it had something to say. She lay on her side, staring at the pale light from the street lamp outside her window, telling herself she needed sleep. Then the front door opened downstairs. Male voices, laughter, heavy footsteps. Ethan was home. Her stepson had been living with them for 2 years while attending college nearby. He was 20 now, tall, broad-shouldered, with his father's dark hair and calm eyes. He was polite but careful around her, called her Claire, never Mom, never anything warmer. Their relationship stayed on safe ground, like two people walking across thin ice. Tonight, he wasn't alone. Another voice followed him inside, deeper, confident, easy. "Man, that game was insane," the stranger said, laughing. Claire checked the clock. 11:07 p.m. She closed her eyes. It was Friday. She couldn't blame him for bringing a friend home. She just wished the house didn't feel so fragile when she was alone in it. Music started downstairs, not loud but enough. A low beat, a rhythm that moved through the floorboards. She pulled her pillow over her ear. It didn't help. She told herself not to get irritated. Ethan rarely caused trouble. Richard always said he's a good kid, and he was. But tonight, Claire's nerves felt thin. She had spent the entire day alone. She had scrolled through her phone too long. She had looked at old photos she shouldn't have opened. Her chest already felt tight before the music even began. The laughter downstairs grew softer, then louder again. She heard cabinets open. The microwave beeped. Glasses clinked. She sat up. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. Let them be young. Let them enjoy the night. But the loneliness pressed in harder than the noise. Claire slipped on a light cardigan over her sleep shirt and stepped into the hallway. The house smelled faintly of pizza and cold air. The lights from the kitchen spilled across the hardwood floor. When she reached the stairs, she paused. Ethan stood at the counter, leaning against it casually. Across from him was the friend. He was taller than Ethan, with sandy brown hair that fell slightly over his forehead. He wore a gray hoodie and jeans, sleeves pushed up to reveal strong forearms. His smile came easily. His energy filled the kitchen in a way that felt warm instead of chaotic. Claire cleared her throat softly. Both young men turned at once. "Hey," Ethan said, surprised. "Sorry if we're loud." "It's okay," Claire replied, keeping her voice calm. "Just try to keep it down a little." The friend straightened, respectful. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry." She almost laughed at that. "You don't have to call me that." He smiled, softer now. "Then what should I call you?" "Claire," she said. There was a brief pause, just a second longer than normal. Something about the way he looked at her felt direct. Not disrespectful, just present. "I'm Mason," he said. She nodded. "Nice to meet you, Mason." Ethan grabbed his phone from the counter. "We'll turn the music down." Claire hesitated, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt in her own kitchen. She noticed the way the light caught the side of Mason's face, the way he listened instead of staring at his screen, the way he seemed to take in details. It made her uncomfortable. She turned quickly. "Good night." "Good night, Claire," Mason said. The way he said her name lingered as she walked back upstairs. In her room, she closed the door gently and leaned against it. Her heart beat faster than it should have. She blamed it on irritation, on being tired, on the sudden social interaction after a long day alone. She got back into bed. The music was lower now. It's just a faint pulse. She could hear their voices instead. At first, it was normal conversation. Sports, professors, a bad referee call. Then the tone shifted. "Your dad's gone again," Mason asked. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "Chicago this time. Doesn't he ever stay home?" There was a pause. Claire held her breath without meaning to. "He's busy," Ethan said carefully. That's how he is. And Claire. Claire's chest tightened. What about her? Ethan asked. She seems quiet. Silence stretched for a few seconds. She is, Ethan admitted. She doesn't really know anyone here. Why'd she move? For Dad. Claire turned onto her back, staring at the ceiling. Words landed heavy. For Dad, it was true. She had left her photography job in Boston when she married Richard. She had sold her small condo. She had told herself love meant compromise. Portland was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it had become a waiting room. She looks younger than I expected, Mason said quietly. Ethan gave a short laugh. Don't be weird. I'm not, Mason replied. I'm just saying she doesn't look. Old Claire felt heat rush to her face. She pressed her hands against her cheeks like she could cool them down. You're thinking too much, Ethan said. I think you don't think enough, Mason replied lightly. The conversation drifted after that. They talked about internships, about moving away after graduation, about wanting something bigger than what they grew up with. Claire listened, until she felt guilty for listening. She rolled onto her side again, pulling the blanket to her chin. Midnight. The house should have been asleep by now. Instead, her mind was wide awake. She thought about how long it had been since someone described her as young, since someone noticed her at all. Richard loved her, she knew that, but his love was steady, predictable, safe. He kissed her forehead before leaving for airports. He sent short texts between meetings. He came home tired. She missed being looked at like she mattered in the present, not just in the past. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Her breath caught. They were coming up. She sat up again, unsure why. Her heart was racing. The footsteps paused outside her door. A soft knock. Claire, Ethan's voice. She stood and walked to the door slowly. When she opened it, Ethan stood there with Mason slightly behind him. Both looked different now. Quieter. Sorry, Ethan said. The heater's acting weird. It's colder upstairs. You okay? Claire blinked. I'm fine. Mason held a folded blanket in his hands. We grabbed an extra one. Justin? Case, the gesture was simple. It's too simple to cause the wave of emotion that suddenly filled her chest. You didn't have to, she said. It's no problem, Mason replied. She reached for the blanket. Their fingers brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, but it felt like a spark of static in dry air. Her pulse jumped. Mason didn't. Pull away fast, not slow either. Just steady. Respectful. You shouldn't be cold, he said quietly. Ethan shifted his weight. We're making hot chocolate. You want some? Claire should have said no. She should have closed the door and protected the fragile balance of the house. But the hallway felt warmer than her bedroom. The company felt warmer than her bed. Okay, she said before she could change her mind. They walked downstairs together. The kitchen lights were softer now. The music was off. Steam rose from a pot on the stove. The scent of chocolate filled the air. Mason poured milk carefully, focused like it was important work. Ethan grabbed 3 mugs. Claire sat at the counter, feeling strangely out of place and completely seen at the same time. Ethan slid a mug toward her. Careful, it's hot. Thanks, she said. They sat together, close but not too close. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mason asked, So what did you do before Portland? Ethan glanced at him, surprised by the direct question. Claire hesitated. I was a photographer. Seriously? Mason leaned forward. That's cool. It was just small jobs, she said quickly. Weddings, portraits. Why'd you stop? He asked. She met his eyes. Life, she answered. Mason didn't look away. Ethan watched her like he was seeing a different version of her, one that existed before she became part of his father's world. You should start again, Mason said simply. Claire gave a soft laugh. It's not that easy. Why not? She didn't have a simple answer. The clock on the microwave read 12:47 a.m. She should have felt tired. Instead, she felt awake in a way she hadn't felt in years. The conversation moved faster now. Stories from college, funny mistakes, dreams about moving to Seattle or New York. Ethan talked about wanting to build something of his own. Mason talked about not settling. Too soon, Claire listened. She spoke. She laughed. The kitchen didn't feel lonely anymore. Time slipped forward quietly. Outside, the street was empty. The world was asleep. Inside, 3 people sat around a counter connected by something fragile and unexpected. Claire knew this night would not change everything, but she also knew it had already changed something. And upstairs, her untouched bed waited in the dark. The kitchen clock blinked 1:12 a.m., but no one seemed ready to leave the table. The house felt different now, warmer, like the walls were listening. Claire wrapped both hands around her mug, even though the hot chocolate was almost gone. Could feel Ethan watching her in a quiet way, not suspicious, just thoughtful. Mason leaned back in his chair, long legs stretched out, studying her like she was a story he wanted to understand. "So you really loved photography?" Mason asked. Claire nodded. "It was the only thing that ever felt fully mine." Ethan looked surprised. "Dad never mentioned that." Claire gave a small smile. "Your dad doesn't talk much about—" Before the words slipped out before she could stop them, thin silence followed. Not awkward, but real. Mason leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "What kind of photos did you like best? People?" she said quickly. "Faces? Real expressions. The moment when someone forgets they're being watched." Mason held her gaze a second longer than usual, like right now. Her breath caught. She looked down at her mug to hide the sudden warmth rising to her cheeks. Ethan shifted in his seat but said nothing. The air felt charged, but no one crossed a line. They stayed, in that space where words mattered more than actions. Ethan checked his phone. "I've got practice at 9. Should sleep." Claire blinked, surprised at how fast time had moved. "Of course. I didn't mean to keep you up." "You didn't," Ethan said quickly. "It's nice talking." He stood, hesitated, then looked at her in a way he never had before. "You don't have to stay in your room all the time." She felt that one. "I know," she said softly. Ethan glanced at Mason. Something silent passed between them. Some unspoken agreement about respect and boundaries. Then Ethan headed upstairs, his footsteps steady on the stairs. The house grew quiet again. Claire and Mason were alone. The kitchen light hummed faintly. Outside, a car drove past, headlights sliding across the window before disappearing. Claire stood to gather the empty mugs. "I should clean this up." "I'll help," Mason said immediately. They moved around each other at the sink, close enough to feel each other's presence, but careful not to touch. Claire washed. Mason dried. The rhythm was simple, calm. "You don't seem happy," Mason said after a moment. The words were gentle, not accusing. She kept her eyes on the water. "Happiness isn't always loud. That's not what I mean." She turned off the faucet slowly. "Then what do you mean?" He placed a mug on the counter and looked at her directly. "You seem like you stopped asking for things." The statement hit harder than she expected. "I'm not a teenager," she replied. "I don't need big dreams. Everyone needs something," he said. "Even grown-ups." She almost laughed at that. "Especially grown-ups." They stood facing each other now, the sink between them like a quiet border. "You moved." "Here for Richard," Mason said carefully. "Yes, and what did you get?" The question felt dangerous. "A marriage," she answered. "A home. And, she didn't respond right away. She thought about the empty afternoons, the canceled dinners, the way she waited for phone calls that lasted 3 minutes. She thought about the camera, packed away in a box upstairs. "I lost some things," she admitted. Mason nodded slowly, like he had expected that. "You don't have to keep losing," he said. She felt a sudden tightness in her chest. "You make it sound easy." "I didn't say it was easy. I said you don't have to." His voice was steady, calm, not romantic, not dramatic. Just honest. Claire realized she hadn't had a conversation like this in years. One where someone listened without trying to fix her. One where someone noticed the quiet parts. She stepped back slightly, putting space between them. "Mason, you're Ethan's friend. I know, and I'm married. I know that too." There was no challenge in his tone, just understanding. "Then why are we having this conversation?" she asked. "Because you look like someone who forgot she matters." The words landed softly but firmly. Claire felt her throat tighten. She turned away, pretending to adjust something on the counter. She would not cry. Not in front of him. "I didn't come to Portland to disappear," she said quietly. "It's just happened. Then don't let it continue." She looked at him again. "You talk like you have it all figured out." He gave a short smile. "I don't. I just know when something feels wrong. And this feels wrong." "No," he said. "This feels honest." That was the problem. The honesty between them felt fragile and real. It wasn't built on flirting or hidden meaning. It was built on seeing each other clearly in a quiet kitchen at almost 2 in the morning. Claire checked the time. "It's 2:03 a.m. You should sleep," she said. "Probably." He agreed, but he didn't move. Neither did she. The silence stretched. But it wasn't heavy. It was full. "You ever think about starting photography again?" he asked. "All the time." "Then why don't you?" "Because it feels selfish." "Selfish isn't always bad." She shook her head slightly. "You're young. You think life is about chasing what you want, and you think life is about giving up what you want." The question was sharp, but not cruel. She had no answer. Mason stepped back first this time, giving her space. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I know. I just think you deserve to feel alive." Her heart beat faster at that word, alive. She couldn't remember the last time she had described herself that way. They walked toward the hallway together. The stairs waited in shadow. At the bottom step, they paused. "Good night, Claire," Mason said. His voice was softer now, almost careful. "Good night." Started up the stairs, then stopped halfway and looked back down at her. "Don't shrink," he said quietly. "Not for anyone." Then he continued upstairs. Claire stood alone, in the hallway long after his door closed. The house returned to stillness, but something inside her refused to settle. She went back into the kitchen, turned off the light, and slowly walked upstairs. Her bedroom door felt heavier than before. Inside, the room looked the same. The neatly made bed, the lamp on Richard's side, the framed photo from their wedding day. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at that photo. Richard looked proud, steady, dependable. She looked hopeful, when had hope turned into routine. She lay down but didn't close her eyes. Mason's words replayed in her mind. "You deserve more. Don't shrink." It wasn't about him. That's what she kept telling herself. It wasn't about attraction or danger. It was about being reminded that she was still a person outside of someone's wife. At 3:10 a.m., she got up. She walked to the closet and pulled down a small storage box from the top shelf. Dust covered the lid. She carried it to the bed and opened it slowly. Inside was her camera. She ran her fingers over it carefully, like greeting an old friend. The weight of it felt familiar in her hands. She sat by the window and looked through the lens at the quiet street below. The world appeared. Sharper, more defined. Her heartbeat steadied. Down the hall, she heard a door close softly. It's probably Ethan heading to the bathroom. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Nothing inappropriate had happened. No lines had been crossed. But something had shifted. She stayed awake until the sky began to lighten. Pale blue replaced black outside her window. Birds started to call from the trees. When her alarm buzzed at 7, she was already sitting up. She showered, dressed, and went downstairs before anyone else woke up. The kitchen felt ordinary again. Morning light streamed across the counter where they had sat just hours before. She made coffee and stood by the sink. Ethan came down first, hair messy, gym bag over his shoulder. He looked at her with a new softness. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He hesitated. "Last night was nice." "It was," she agreed. He studied her face. "You should show me your photos sometime." The offer surprised her. I will." He nodded, satisfied, and headed out the door. Mason came down a few minutes later, slower, quieter. He looked slightly tired, but calm. "Morning, Claire." "Morning." There was no tension, no secret energy. It's just a shared understanding. "Thanks for staying up," he said. "Thank you for the hot chocolate." He smiled faintly. "I meant what I said." "I know." They held each other's gaze for one brief second. Not romantic, not reckless, just real. "Have a good day," he said. "You too." He left, closing the door gently behind him. The house fell silent again. Claire stood in the middle of the kitchen, coffee warm in her hands. For years, silence had felt like emptiness. Now it felt like space, space to choose. She carried her camera to the dining table and set it down carefully. Richard would return in 2 days. They would need to talk. Not about Mason, not about Ethan, about her. She walked outside onto the porch, lifted the camera, and took a photo of the morning light spilling across the street. The click of the shutter echoed softly. It was the first photo she had taken in 3 years. And as she lowered the camera, she realized something simple but powerful. The sleepless night hadn't been about temptation. It had been about awakening. And Claire Dawson was finally awake.